I was just looking for tax papers. Then I found a photo. A little boy with my husband's face. Who is this? I asked. He said, just some kid. But I found another photo and this time he was holding him. The shocking reality was, it started in the most ordinary way possible, and I think that's part of why it got under my skin so fast. If it had happened during some huge fight, or after I found some suspicious text, maybe my brain would have known where to put it. But it happened on a Thursday after work, while I was still wearing my teacher badge and standing in the hallway with one shoe off. Jason had texted me around 4:30. Can you grab the blue tax folder from the closet? Mark needs the 2022 file before he calls tonight. That was it. Nothing weird. Nothing dramatic. Just my husband asking me to find paperwork for his accountant like we were any other boring married couple with a hallway closet full of folders we kept meaning to organize. I tossed my bag on the chair, kicked one heel off, and opened the closet. We kept everything in there. Tax folders, old warranties, instruction manuals for appliances we didn't even own anymore, random charging cables, and a few storage boxes from before we got married that we'd never really unpacked. We lived in a townhouse outside Denver, not huge, not tiny, just enough space for two people who kept promising each other they'd do a proper cleanup someday. I found the blue folder in about 30 seconds, but while I was pulling it out, another box shifted and tipped sideways. The lid slid halfway off and a few old papers spilled toward the floor. I crouched down to shove everything back in, mostly annoyed, and that's when a photograph slipped free and landed face up against the baseboard. I picked it up without thinking. Then I just stared at it. It was a little boy. Maybe 5 or 6. He was sitting on someone's lap, but the adult was only half in frame. The focus was on the kid. Brown hair. Wide eyes. A small crooked smile like he was trying not to laugh at the person taking the picture. My whole body went still. Because I knew that face. Not him. The shape of him. The eyes were Jason's. The nose was Jason's. Even the smile had that same slight tilt on one side like he was always a second away from making a joke he hadn't said out loud yet. It wasn't vague. It wasn't one of those, oh wow, he kind of looks like him things. It was close enough to make my chest tighten before my brain even caught up. I sat there on the floor longer than I want to admit, staring at a child I had never seen before and trying to force a normal explanation into place. A nephew. Maybe. A cousin's kid. A family friend's son. Something ordinary. Something that belonged in a box of old photos without turning my stomach over. I looked back into the box. There were a few envelopes, old receipts, some folded documents, and more photographs underneath, but I didn't dig through it right then. I wish I could say that meant I was respecting boundaries or staying calm, but really I think I was scared of what I'd find if I looked too closely. So I took the tax folder, kept the photo in my hand for a second longer, then set it on the hallway table and went into the kitchen to start dinner. For the next hour, I moved around like I was acting out a version of myself. I rinsed lettuce. I preheated the oven. I checked my phone. I walked past the hallway twice and looked at the photo both times, like maybe the face would change if I came at it from another angle. It didn't. When Jason came home, he looked completely normal. That bothered me immediately, which was unfair because he hadn't done anything in front of me yet. He walked in with his laptop bag over one shoulder, loosened his tie, kissed my cheek, and thanked me for finding the folder. Mark sent me 2 follow-up emails, he said. I swear that guy enjoys this. I gave a little laugh because that's what I was supposed to do. Then I picked up the photo and held it out. Hey, who's this? He barely glanced at it. That's what stuck with me the most later. Not panic. Not surprise. Just this quick, dismissive look, like I'd held up a grocery receipt. Oh, he said. Just some kid. I actually laughed a little because I thought maybe he was being sarcastic. Yeah, I can see that, I said. Whose kid? He set his keys down in the bowl by the door and walked toward the kitchen sink. I don't know. Old stuff. The answer hit wrong right away. Too quick. Too flat. I followed him with my eyes. He looks a lot like you. He opened the fridge, stared inside for a second, then shrugged like we were discussing the weather. You're reading into it. That should have ended it. Maybe in a healthier marriage it would have. Maybe I should have said okay and let it go. But something in me had already started moving. Quietly, but fast. Because if it was nothing, why wouldn't he just say what it was? People explain harmless things all the time. That's the easy part. The hard part is what they avoid. I stood there holding the picture while he poured water into a glass and asked what I'd made for dinner. I answered him. He answered me. We had a completely normal night. We ate roasted chicken and salad. He told me about a problem at work with a delayed project. I told him one of my students had cried because another girl told her poster looked ugly. We watched half an episode of something on Netflix before I said I was tired and went upstairs. But the whole time, that picture was still sitting in my head. Not even because I thought the answer had to be horrible. Just because it felt like a crack. Small maybe, but real. Jason had always been private. I knew that about him from the beginning. He wasn't secretive in the obvious way. He didn't guard his phone or disappear at weird hours or start fights to distract from things. He just had these sealed-off rooms in himself that I'd learned not to push on. His childhood was complicated. His last serious relationship was messy. His family was not close. That was usually where it stopped. And I had accepted that. Not because I didn't care, but because when we were dating, it felt respectful not to force open things someone clearly didn't want to relive. Then we got serious fast. We moved in together. We got married. Life filled in around the missing pieces, and I think I mistook comfort for full honesty. Lying in bed that night, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it really was some random kid from years ago. Maybe he had forgotten where the photo came from. Maybe I had spent too many years around children and parents and family resemblance charts, and my brain was just making patterns where there weren't any. I almost convinced myself. Then around midnight, Jason was asleep beside me, and all I could see when I closed my eyes was that little face. The next morning I left for school early, exhausted and irritated with myself. I teach 3rd grade, which means my mornings are usually too loud and too busy for spiraling, and I was grateful for that. By 10 a.m., I'd dealt with a broken pencil box, a spelling quiz meltdown, and 2 kids arguing over who got to feed the class fish. Normal problems. Small problems. Manageable problems. Still, every quiet moment my mind went right back to the photo. By lunch, I had opened my messages and typed out 3 different versions of a text to Jason before deleting all of them. Who is that kid? Why were you weird about the picture? Is there something you need to tell me? I sent none of them. That evening he acted normal again. Maybe even extra normal. He brought takeout home from the Thai place I liked without asking. He sat at the kitchen island and told me a long story about Mark Lopez messing up a file request and then pretending he hadn't. He kissed the top of my head when he walked past me. And for a minute, I actually hated myself for how suspicious I felt. Because this was my husband. Jason wasn't flashy. He wasn't cruel. He didn't embarrass me, didn't flirt in front of me, didn't make me feel small. He remembered my coffee order. He shoveled snow without complaining. When my mom had surgery, he drove me to the hospital every day that week and sat in those stiff waiting room chairs like it was nothing. That's what made it harder. If he'd been careless in other ways, maybe I would have known what to do with this. Instead, I found myself watching him more closely over the next few days, and I don't mean in some dramatic detective way. Just little things. The hesitation before he answered certain questions. The way he'd mentioned college but never really the years after. The fact that most of the framed photos in our house started around the time he was 29, like his whole life before me had been condensed into a few vague stories and 1 storage box in a closet. By Sunday, I couldn't stand it anymore. He was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, half watching a game, and I sat down across from him and said, "That picture is still bothering me." He looked up. "What picture?" "The one from the closet." His face changed, just for a second. Not enough that somebody else would have caught it. "I did." I said, "The little boy really looks like you." He leaned back against the couch cushion and gave this tired exhale like I was dragging out something silly. "Sarah, it's an old photo." "That's not an answer." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "I already told you. It was just old stuff." "Okay, then tell me whose kid it was." He looked at me for a long second, and then he said, "I don't remember." I knew right then he was lying. Not because I had proof. Not because I was certain of the reason. Just because people don't forget things like that if they're harmless. They forget details, maybe. A year. A place. A person's last name. They don't forget the entire explanation unless the explanation itself is the problem. I asked him one more time. "Jason, why are you being weird about this?" And he did something that was, honestly, more convincing than getting angry would have been. He got quiet. Calm. He closed his laptop, looked me straight in the face, and said, "I'm not being weird. You found an old photo in a box and now you've decided it means something." It doesn't. That should have reassured me. Instead it made something drop in my stomach. Because it sounded practiced. Like he'd had to say versions of that to himself before. I let it go outwardly after that. We went to bed. We got up for work. We made coffee. We moved through the beginning of the week like nothing had changed. But everything had changed for me. Once the question existed, it touched everything. I started remembering little comments I'd ignored when we were dating. One time, years ago, we'd been in a park and a little boy on a scooter had wiped out near us. Jason had rushed over so fast it surprised me. He was gentle with the kid, calm in that very specific way some people are only when they've done something before. I joked later that he was weirdly good with children, and he'd just said, "I used to be around one a lot," then changed the subject. At the time I thought maybe he meant a nephew. I remembered another night when we were cleaning out his email, and one subject line had popped up from years earlier with the words pediatric records in it. He'd reached over and deleted it before I could really process what I'd seen. I hadn't thought much of it. Adults get weird medical emails all the time. Now those little moments started lining up in my head in a way I didn't like. By Wednesday, I was carrying that feeling around like a fever. I came home from school to an empty house and stood in the hallway for a full minute just looking at the closet door. I knew going through Jason's old things was a line. I knew that. I also knew that whatever this was, he had already had multiple chances to tell me the truth. So I opened the closet, pulled the old box back down, and set it on the floor. This time I went through it carefully. Most of it was boring. Utility bills. Old pay stubs. Apartment paperwork from before we met. A card from somebody named Melissa with no last name written inside, just a short note that said, "Hope you're doing okay. Call me when you can." No signature beyond the first name. A few receipts from Phoenix, Arizona from almost 9 years ago. A hotel key sleeve. A folded paper with a pediatric clinic logo at the top and half the information torn away. I sat back and stared at that one for a long time. Not because it proved anything on its own, but because it made the air around me feel different. Then I found another photograph. This one hit harder than the first. It wasn't just the same boy. It was Jason. Younger, softer somehow, sitting on a couch with the little boy on his lap. The kid was laughing straight at the camera. Jason wasn't. He was looking at the boy with an expression I had never seen on my husband's face before. Open. Unguarded. Like whoever took the picture caught him in a moment he wasn't editing. On the back, in faded black ink, were 3 words. My whole world. I think that was the moment my denial finally gave out. Because random kids are not your whole world. A friend's son is not your whole world. A nephew maybe, but no one hides a nephew like that. No one says, just some kid if that's all it is. I sat on the closet floor with that photo in my hand and felt every memory of my marriage start rearranging itself in real time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It was stranger than that. It was like something inside me went very still. I stared at the boy's face again. Then Jason's. Then back at the words. My whole world. Whatever the truth was, it was big. Big enough that he had buried it in a box. Big enough that he had looked me in the face and lied twice without even blinking. I heard Jason's car pull into the driveway and my whole body locked up. I shoved the papers back into the box, but not neatly. My hands were shaking too much for neat. I kept the second photograph in my sweater pocket without even deciding to. It just stayed there, warm against me, like my body knew before my mind did that I would need it. The front door opened. "Sarah," he called. "You home?" I stood up too fast and nearly hit my shoulder on the closet frame. "I'm here," I said, and my voice sounded so normal it scared me. He came down the hall, loosened his tie, glanced at me, then at the open closet. "What are you doing?" For half a second I thought about pulling the photo out right then. Holding it up. Ending the whole thing in the hallway. But I didn't. Not yet. Because suddenly I understood something that made me even colder than the lie itself. He had hidden this for years. Which meant whatever explanation he gave me now, it would come already shaped. Already cleaned up. Already designed to get him through the conversation. And if I was going to ask him what this boy meant, I needed to know as much as I could first. So I forced a shrug and said, "Just trying to straighten this mess out." He laughed softly. "Good luck with that." Then he kissed my temple and walked toward the kitchen, completely unaware that something in our life had already split open. I stood there for another second, hand pressed against the photograph in my pocket, listening to him run water at the sink like it was any other night. That was the moment I knew I wasn't imagining it anymore. Something was wrong. Something big. And whatever Jason Robinson had buried in that closet, I was going to uncover all of it. I didn't confront him that night. That's the part that still surprises me when I think back on it. Not because I'm some incredibly patient person, but because everything in me was already screaming for answers. I had the second photo in my pocket. I had enough pieces to know this wasn't nothing. But I also knew one thing for sure. If I walked into that conversation blind, he would control it. So I waited. Not long. Just enough. The next few days, I acted normal. Or at least, I tried to. I went to work, taught my classes, graded papers, smiled when parents waved at pickup. I came home, cooked dinner, asked Jason about his day. I listened to him complain about deadlines and meetings like I always did. But underneath all of that, I was watching. Listening more carefully than I ever had before. And once you start doing that, you realize how much you've been letting slide. Jason never talked about the years right before we met. He always skimmed past them. If a story came close, he'd redirect it. Make a joke. Ask me something instead. I used to think it was just his personality. Now it felt intentional. On Thursday night, I sat on the couch next to him while he scrolled through something on his phone. I leaned my head on his shoulder like I always did, but my eyes stayed on the screen. Just glimpses. Names. Notifications. Nothing obvious. But it didn't calm me down. It made me more certain that whatever I was looking for wasn't going to be sitting out in the open. So the next day, I went looking where people forget to clean up. Old accounts. Jason had mentioned years ago that he used to have Facebook, but never bothered with it anymore. I remembered that because I had teased him about being one of those people who just disappeared from social media. It took me longer than I expected to find it. Different profile picture. Slightly different username. Fewer friends. It looked abandoned, like something he'd walked away from and never looked back. Which made it perfect. My hands were actually shaking a little when I opened it. I scrolled slowly at first. Old posts. Random updates. A few comments from people I didn't recognize. Nothing dramatic. Just a version of Jason I hadn't seen before. Younger. Less controlled. Then I clicked into his photos. And there he was again. The little boy. Same face. Same eyes. But this time there was no cropping. Jason was sitting on a worn-looking couch, the boy in his lap, both of them smiling. Not posed. Not stiff. Real. There were more pictures. At a park. In a kitchen. The boy holding what looked like a birthday cupcake while Jason crouched next to him. Every single one of them made my chest feel tighter. Then I saw the caption. My whole world. I stared at those 3 words until they stopped looking like words. Because there it was. Not a guess. Not a maybe. My husband had a child. And he had chosen not to tell me. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at that screen. Long enough for the light outside to shift. Long enough for my coffee to go cold next to me. I clicked through the comments under the photos. Most of them were old. Friends saying the kid was adorable. Someone had written, he looks just like you. Jason had replied with a simple I know. There was one comment from a woman. Melissa. She had written, he misses you. Jason hadn't replied. That was the one that stayed with me. He misses you. Not, we miss you. Not, come visit. Just, that. Like a statement that didn't expect anything back. I leaned back in my chair and felt something inside me shift. Because this wasn't just a lie. This was a whole part of his life he had erased. I thought about every conversation we'd ever had about the future. About kids. About whether we wanted them someday. Jason had always been hesitant. Not opposed, just non-committal. I don't know, he'd say. Maybe later. I had accepted that. People take time with big decisions like that. Now it felt different. Now it felt like he had already made that decision once and walked away from it. I closed the laptop and just sat there for a while. I kept picturing the boy's face. Tyler, I would learn later. 8 years old. Old enough to remember things. Old enough to feel absence. Old enough to wonder why his father wasn't there. And Jason had built an entire life with me without ever mentioning him. That was the part one couldn't fit into anything. Not neatly. Not in a way that made sense. I didn't confront him that night either. I needed to hear it from him. Not just the fact of it, but how he would explain it. Because that mattered more than anything at that point. The truth itself was already bad. But the way he told it, that was going to decide everything. Saturday morning, the house was quiet. Jason was in the kitchen making coffee, scrolling through his phone like he always did. Sunlight was coming in through the window, hitting the counter, making everything look calm and normal. I stood there for a second just watching him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the person in those photos. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the second picture. I found another one, I said. He turned, saw the photo, and everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling. No immediate denial. Just a stillness that spread through his whole body. He set his phone down slowly. We stood there looking at each other for what felt like a long time. Then I said it. You have a son. He didn't answer right away. He just sat down at the kitchen table, like his legs had given out under him. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I walked over and set the photo down in front of him. How old is he? I asked. Jason rubbed his face with both hands before answering. 8. The number hit harder than I expected. 8 years. Long enough that he had been alive for almost our entire relationship. What's his name? Tyler. I nodded once, like I was processing something simple. But inside, everything was loud. Where is he? Phoenix. Why didn't you tell me? That was the question. The one everything came back to. Jason looked at me then. Really looked at me. I didn't know how. I let out a short breath. That's not an answer. He swallowed. Things were complicated. His mom and I, we ended badly. There were custody issues, arguments. She moved away. It just fell apart. And you just let it? I asked. I tried, he said quickly. At first. I did. At first. The words hung there. He looked down at the table. It got messy. Lawyers. Money. She didn't want me involved unless it was on her terms. I didn't have the resources back then. I was barely keeping my own life together. And then you met me, I said. He nodded. And you just, what? Decided to start over. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Jason? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated now. I didn't want to lose what we had before it even started. I stared at him. You didn't want to lose me, I said slowly, so you just erased him? I didn't erase him. You told me he was just some kid. He flinched at that. I panicked. You had 6 years to not panic. That was when something in him broke a little. I didn't think you'd stay, he said quietly. The honesty in that moment almost hurt more than the lie. Why? I asked. Because who wants to sign up for that, he said. A guy with a kid he barely sees, messy history, baggage. I didn't even get the chance to decide that. I cut in. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something close to fear. I know. That was it. No justification that made sense. No explanation that fixed anything. Just that. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. Do you talk to him? I asked. Sometimes. How often is sometimes? He didn't answer right away. Not enough, he said finally. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight. Because that was the other part of this. Not just that he had lied to me, but that there was a child out there who had been left in the space between his past and his present. A child who, at some point, had been his whole world. And now wasn't. I looked at Jason and realized I didn't know what to do with that version of him. The one who could love something that deeply and still walk away. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then I pushed my chair back and stood up. I need space, I said. Sarah, I can't process this with you standing right here, I cut in. He nodded slowly, like he understood that much at least. I went upstairs, packed a bag without really thinking about what I was putting into it, and called my sister. Amanda, I said when she answered. Can I stay with you for a few days? There was a pause. What happened? I looked around our bedroom. At the bed we shared. The life we built. The version of everything I thought was real. I'll explain when I get there, I said. When I walked out with my bag, Jason was standing in the hallway. I'm sorry, he said. I believed that he was. That didn't make it enough. I walked past him, out the door, and into a life that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. And the whole drive to Amanda's place, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Not just the lie, but what it meant. Because if someone can hide something this big for this long, what else are they capable of hiding? Amanda didn't ask questions right away. That was one of the reasons I called her. She opened the door, saw my face, saw the bag in my hand, and just stepped aside to let me in. No pressure. No, what happened before I even crossed the threshold. Just space. I didn't realize how much I needed that until I was already inside. Her place was smaller than ours. A 2-bedroom apartment near downtown Denver, clean but lived in. Shoes by the door, a half-folded blanket on the couch, a coffee mug on the counter. Normal life, untouched by whatever mine had just turned into. You can take the spare room, she said, like this was temporary. Like it was something we could label and contain. Thanks. I set my bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, and for a second, I just stared at my hands. Amanda leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Okay, she said gently. Do you want to talk, or do you want me to pretend this is a sleepover and we watch bad TV? I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for days. He has a kid, I said. She blinked. Jason? I nodded. There was a long pause. Like, now, she asked. Or, before me, I said. 8 years old. Amanda's face shifted slowly from confusion to disbelief. And he didn't tell you? I shook my head. Not once. Not in 6 years. She pushed off the doorframe and sat down next to me. Okay, she said slowly. Okay, start from the beginning. So I did. The closet. The photo. The way he brushed it off. The second photo. The Facebook account. The caption. The confrontation. I told her everything, and the more I said it out loud, the more unreal it sounded. Like I was explaining someone else's life, not mine. Amanda didn't interrupt much. She just listened, her expression getting tighter the further I went. When I finished, she let out a long breath. That's not small, she said. I know. That's not like forgetting to mention an ex or something, she continued. That's a whole child. I know. She looked at me carefully. Do you think he was ever going to tell you? I didn't answer right away, because I had already asked myself that question about 100 times on the drive over. I don't know, I said finally. He said he didn't want to lose me. That he didn't know how to bring it up once too much time had passed. Amanda frowned. That sounds like something you say to make it sound better. Yeah. Silence settled between us. Do you believe him? She asked. I stared at the wall for a second. I believe that he didn't tell me on purpose, I said. I believe that he made a choice to keep it from me. That's not the same thing as being scared, Amanda said. No, I said quietly. It's not. She leaned back on her hands, thinking. And what about the kid? She asked after a moment. That question hit differently. Because up until then, everything had been about me and Jason. Our relationship. Our trust. Our life. But there was someone else in this. I can't stop thinking about him, I admitted. Tyler. He's 8. Amanda nodded slowly. That's old enough to remember. Exactly. And Jason just isn't there? He said they lost contact, I said. But I don't know what that actually means. Amanda gave me a look. It means he stopped trying hard enough. I didn't argue with that. Because it lined up too cleanly with everything else. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was replaying the argument, but because my brain wouldn't stop trying to understand the version of Jason I had just met. The one who could hold a child in his arms and call him his whole world, and then build a completely separate life without him. The one who could look at me every day and just not say anything. By morning, my phone was full of messages. Jason, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Please talk to me. I should have told you. I didn't know how. I stared at them for a long time before putting my phone face down. Because none of it answered the question that actually mattered. Not why he didn't tell me, but why he could live with not telling me. The next few days settled into something strange. I went to work like normal. I came back to Amanda's place. We had dinner, watched TV, talked about anything except Jason unless I brought him up first. And he kept texting. Not constantly. Not aggressively. Just there. Checking in. Apologizing. Saying he wanted to fix things. At one point, he wrote, "I'll tell you everything. Whatever you want to know." I almost replied. Then I stopped. Because I realized something that made my chest feel tight all over again. He had already told me everything he thought I needed to know. And it hadn't been enough. By Friday, I agreed to meet him. Not because I was ready to forgive him, but because I needed to hear the rest of it. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Amanda's apartment and our house. Neutral ground. He was already there when I walked in. He stood up when he saw me, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to hug me or not. I didn't give him the chance to decide. I sat down across from him and said, "Tell me the part you left out." He sat back down slowly. "What part?" "The real one," I said. "Not the version that makes you sound like you just got overwhelmed." He nodded once, like he understood. Then he looked down at his hands. "Melissa and I didn't just fall apart," he said. "We fought. A lot. About everything. Money, time, how to raise Tyler. It got ugly. And I left," he said. I felt that more than I expected. "You left," I repeated. "I told myself it was temporary," he continued. "That I just needed space. That I'd come back when things calmed down. But you didn't." He shook his head. Every time I thought about going back, it felt harder. Like I had already missed too much. Like I didn't know how to step back into that role without everything blowing up again. "So you just didn't." "I sent money sometimes," he said quickly. "I called a few times. But it wasn't consistent." And eventually, she stopped answering. I sat there, processing that. Because it wasn't a clean story. It wasn't, "She took my kid and ran." It was messier than that. He had stepped away. And then kept stepping. "What about when we started dating?" I asked. He looked at me. "I didn't want to bring that into something that felt good," he said. "You and me, it was easy. It worked. So you decided I didn't need to know." "I decided I didn't want to lose you," he said. "That's not the same thing." "I know." We sat there in silence for a second. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. "If I hadn't found that photo, would you have ever told me?" He didn't answer right away. And that hesitation was enough. "I don't know," he said. I nodded slowly. Because that felt like the most honest thing he had said so far. And somehow, it was the worst one. I leaned back in my chair and looked at him. At the man I had built a life with. At the man I thought I understood. And I realized something that scared me more than the lie itself. I didn't know where the line was for him. Not really. Because this wasn't one bad decision. It was years of them. Stacked on top of each other. Quiet. Controlled. Hidden. "I don't know if I can come back from this," I said finally. He nodded, like he had already expected that. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. I believed that he meant it. But I also knew something else. Sometimes it's not about what someone is willing to do after the truth comes out. It's about what they were willing to do before it did. And I wasn't sure I could unsee that. I stood up before the conversation could go in circles. "Take care of yourself," he said as I grabbed my bag. I paused for a second. Then I said, "You should try taking care of him." His face changed at that. And for the first time since this all started, he didn't have anything to say. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the cold air, feeling like I had just closed a door I didn't know how to reopen. And the whole way back to Amanda's place, one thought kept repeating in my head. Not about me. Not even about Jason. But about a boy in Phoenix who might still be waiting for a father who chose to disappear. The apartment felt quieter after that. Not because Amanda changed anything, but because I did. Before, I was filling the silence with questions. Replaying conversations. Trying to make sense of Jason, of us, of how something that felt so steady could shift that fast. After the coffee shop, it wasn't questions anymore. It was clarity. Not the clean kind. Not the kind that gives you answers and closure in a neat package. The heavier kind. The kind that sits with you and doesn't move. Amanda noticed it first. "You look different," she said one night while we were eating takeout on her couch. I gave a small shrug. "I think I just stopped trying to fix it." She nodded slowly. "That helps sometimes." "It doesn't feel like it," I said. "No," she admitted. "But it's honest." That word stayed with me. Honest. Because that was the thing I kept circling back to. Not the child. Not even the past itself. It was the fact that Jason had lived with me, shared a bed with me, built a life with me, and chosen not to be honest. Every single day. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Another message from him. I didn't pick it up right away. At first, when I left, I read every message the second it came in. I'd analyze the wording, the tone, the timing. Try to find something in them that would make the situation feel less final. Now I let them sit. Eventually, I reached over and opened it. I talked to Melissa. That made me pause. I read the next message. She said I can call Tyler. I stared at the screen for a long time. Because that was the first thing he'd said that felt like it wasn't about me. It wasn't, I miss you. It wasn't, please come back. It wasn't, I'll do anything to fix us. It was about his son. Finally. I set the phone down and leaned back into the couch. Amanda glanced over. Him. Yeah. What now? I exhaled slowly. He talked to her. The mom. And? He might actually call his kid. Amanda studied my face. How do you feel about that? That was the problem. I didn't have one clean answer. Relieved, I said after a second. And also, angry that it took this. Both can be true. I nodded. Because that's what this whole situation had turned into. Not one feeling. Not one clear path. Just layers. Later that night, I went into the spare room and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. I opened Jason's messages again. There were a lot of them now. Apologies. Explanations. Small updates about work, like he didn't know what else to say but didn't want to disappear completely either. And now this. I talked to Melissa. I thought about the photos again. About the way he had looked at Tyler in them. Not posed. Not forced. Real. That part had never been fake. Whatever else Jason was, whatever choices he made after, that moment in those photos had been real. And that made everything more complicated. Because it meant he was capable of being that person. He just hadn't been. I typed out a message, then deleted it. Typed another one. Deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote. Did you call him? It took a few minutes for him to respond. Not yet. I'm going to tomorrow. I stared at that. Part of me wanted to say, do it now. Part of me wanted to stay completely out of it. Instead, I locked my phone and set it on the nightstand. Because for once, this wasn't something I needed to manage. The next day passed slowly. I went to work, but I was distracted. Not in the frantic, spiraling way from before. Just distant. At lunch, I found myself wondering what Tyler looked like now. 8 years old. Taller, probably. Different haircut. Same eyes. I wondered if he still laughed the same way. I wondered if he still remembered his dad clearly, or if Jason had already faded into something vague and half-formed. That thought stayed with me the entire drive back to Amanda's. When I walked in, my phone buzzed again. Jason. I called him. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there in the hallway, keys still in my hand, staring at the notification. Then I tapped it. He answered. Jason had written. He didn't say much at first. But he stayed on the phone. I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly. Not forgiveness. Just something. He sounds older, Jason added in another message. I don't know what I expected. I don't know how to talk to him. I sat down on the edge of the couch and read that again. I don't know how to talk to him. It was honest. Maybe for the first time in all of this, it was just honest. Amanda walked in from the kitchen and saw my face. What is it? He called him, I said. She nodded slowly. Okay. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. He said he didn't know what to say. Amanda sat down across from me. That makes sense. Yeah. Silence settled for a second. Then she asked, does it change anything for you? I thought about that. About everything that had happened in the last couple of weeks. The photo. The lie. The confrontation. The realization that the man I trusted completely had been carrying something this big without ever letting me see it. And now this. A phone call. A step in the right direction. But still, just a step. I don't know, I said honestly. And that was the truth. Because as much as I wanted to believe that this meant something, that it meant Jason was finally stepping up, finally doing the right thing, it didn't erase the years before it. It didn't erase the fact that he had been okay with not doing this until he got caught. That was the part one couldn't let go of. That was the part that stayed. A few days later, I went back to the house. Not to move back in. Just to get some things. Jason wasn't there. We had agreed on that. The house felt the same. That was what hit me first. Everything was exactly where I had left it. My shoes by the door. The blanket folded over the arm of the couch. A mug in the sink. Normal. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at the box again. This time, I didn't feel that sharp panic. Just a quiet understanding. I closed it without opening it. I didn't need to see it again. On my way out, I paused in the hallway. This was the life I had built. The one I thought I knew completely. And now I knew it had been missing something from the beginning. Not just the child. The truth. Jason texted me later that night. I talked to him again today. He said my name. I stared at that message longer than I expected. Because that mattered. More than anything else he had said so far, that mattered. He said my name. A small step. A real one. But not one that fixed everything. I sat there with my phone in my hand, thinking about what came next. About what it would mean to go back. About what it would mean to walk away. About whether trust is something you rebuild, or something that, once broken like that, never really comes back the same. I don't have an answer yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I know this much now. I'm not just deciding whether I can forgive him for hiding a child. I'm deciding whether I can trust the kind of person who could live with that choice for years, and only change when he had no other option. And I don't know if that's something you come back from. So I guess I'm asking, if someone can hide something this big from you for that long, does it matter what they do after you find out? Or is the damage already done?